Hi, everyone, and welcome back to Astro Alchemy. I'm Sarah, and I'm here with Lora. And this is our weekly show where we discuss the current gate that the sun is moving through from a human design perspective and from the gene keys perspective. And then we also touch on the astrological transits that are informing that as well. Today is Tuesday, October 18th. Today, we're going to be talking about the 32nd key, and we're right now in the 32nd gate, the 32nd key. We're right now in the 32nd point 5 or 6. So we're right at the very end of the 32. And so we're kind of additionally giving this week kind of an extra day in order to cover each key on its own. Is there anything else that I'm missing, Laura?
I'm not sure. Well, just to explain that, there's 6 lines in each hexagram and 7 days in the week, so they don't add up. Hence the 2 for this week for you. But on that note, you should. I'm a 5th line person, so I'm gonna use my 5th line projection field going on right here for you, and try to seduce you and say, "Hey, howdy, how do you do? Hello there, hello you on YouTube or Spotify or wherever you may be coming into this frequency. If you like us, feel free to subscribe or like or do whatever it is that people do with these platforms. And the reason for that is not to lure you in just for the sake of attention. That's not it. It's practical. So if you pay attention to what we're saying every week, it's temporary kind of, because we talk about the energies of the week, especially on the astrological side. And so if you're not subscribed, then you're going to miss out on the weekly happenings. But if you are subscribed, then you're going to get a little message, I think, in your inbox that says, hey, we made something for you. Which, like, I was thinking about whether I want to do this or not, because it bothers me when other people do it on YouTube. I'm like, it will really help me out if you subscribe, like really, like help you out with your ego, with your attention attractiveness, or like seeking your attention, whatever the terminology is. And then I realized actually it is kind of practical, especially like for the themes of our topics that we talk about, but only do it if it's correct for your strategy and authority. And you may be asking yourself, hey, I don't know what that is. In which case, go to mybodygraph.com or jovianarchive.com and put in your birth info. If you don't know your birth info, go ask your mother, and hopefully she's alive. If not, I'm sorry, go check your birth certificate, get yourself a birth chart, and you'll see what your strategy and authority is, and then learn about it, and then make decisions wisely for yourself, and only subscribe if it's correct for you. Otherwise, you're not part of our fractal and we don't want you. Just kidding. Please listen. On that note, I think that's my spiel.
Yeah. Let me just add, because I realized that, yes, thank you, like and subscribe. And like I said, today's Tuesday, October 18th, but it is 5:16 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, and it is 2:16 p.m. Pacific Standard Time. So if anyone's just trying to figure out what time we are,
yeah, you probably, if you're with us every week, you're like, wow, these girls are obsessed with time. They're just like, it is this minute of this day.
For astrology, it's very important to be very specific. So if anyone wants to like cast the chart of our podcast, they can.
Well, yeah, but we show it to you anyways on YouTube, so you don't need to trouble yourself, because we're going to show it to you. On that note, shall we begin?
Yeah, let's get started. You can pull up the human design chart of the moment.
Here we go. So like Sarah said, we're in gate 32, line 6, and it's 0.1, so that's color 1. Where to begin? There's a lot. 32 is down here. If you're not watching this on YouTube, if you're on Spotify or Apple, like, shout out to you, Apple. We never bring up Apple people, but hey, hello, how do you do? But if you're listening to this and not watching this, if you can, get yourself a human design chart. It's like empty, just so you can orient yourself, so you know what we're talking about when we're pointing to things or bringing them up. But if you look at that chart and you look at the left-hand side, there's a little triangle doing its own little thing. That's the splenic center. And there are 3 channels, 3 lines connecting that triangle to the square on the bottom. That's the root. And 32, if you can see, if you like zoom in, there's 32 there with a little black line. That is gate 32 where we are right now with the sun. That's the sun's position. 32 is part of the splenic awareness center. It deals with intuition, instinct, survival. And this channel, that's, well, 32 in and of itself is a channel, the gate of duration. And the whole channel is called the channel, gosh, can't keep doing it wrong, the channel of transformation. And its little buddy here, the harmonic gate of 32 is 54, which is the marrying maiden. 54 is in Capricorn. We're here in 32 in Libra. And it is part of tribal circuitry, which deals with resources, groups of people, maintaining the status quo to ensure survival of the group, conforming to a certain degree. It's an interesting group dynamic type of circuit. Trying to think if there's like any other like very baseline strategic stuff to shout out at you. The programming partner of 32, which is where the earth is always exactly opposite the sun, is in 42. 42 is in the sacral. So that also like plays into their dynamics, their relationship with one another. Currently, we have Saturn in 13 and the moon in 33. So if you're like looking at this chart with us, you may be wondering why those two centers are colored in and everything else is white. It's because the moon is currently bringing definition to this particular channel, the channel of the prodigal, I believe. It's an energy of a listener. So it's good for us and our dynamic right now to listen to each other. But by the time you listen to this, it may be over. So it's a temporary thing. But we've been the past couple of weeks reading the current line for 32, but instead of doing that, found a resource, opening it up. We're gonna read all the lines. Is that okay, Sarah? Can we just shout them all out? All these people.
Yeah, let's rock and roll.
I'm gonna put on my glasses so I don't have to like shove my face into the screen.
Oh, I like those.
We'll start with line 1. Well, it's the gate of duration, which the main theme here is the only thing which endures is change. And line 1 is conservation with, I do have to make it bigger, can't see, with the sun in exaltation and Mars in detriment. So the sun in exaltation is a life-sustaining respect and attention to all aspects of a process, the potential to develop the instinct through detailed attention to a process. Mars in detriment is the uncontrollable urge to bypass essentials, which inevitably leads to the disruption of continuity, the fear of lack of potential, and the corresponding lack of attention. I feel like this is going to be boring, but I'll do all of them and just keep on going. Duration.
Yeah, we can be kind of brief with it and just show everyone that this is what it is, and basically go through the different words on the left hand side. So the second line has to do with restraint. The third line has to do with lack on continuity. The fourth line is called right is might. The fifth line is about flexibility, and it says easy adaptation to circumstances. And obviously this gate in general has a lot to do with change. So the idea of easy adaptation to circumstances is very lunar in nature, I think, and maybe mercurial as well, because it has this this quality of just being very flexible. And then finally, the sixth line, which is the one that we're in, the need to calmly face impermanence and an underlying acceptance of change that may or may not lead to tranquility, the instinctive awareness to accept change and transformation. And I'm like, this is so just, I'm glad we're talking about it on the 6 line day, because right now we are literally on the heels of eclipse season. It's coming in fast and furious. I mean, some of the stories that I've been getting and the people that have been reaching out to me have been really, you know, kind of just like there's a lot of chaotic energy going on, and it's like we've been thrown into the blender and we don't know where we're going to land yet. And so the, I guess, comfort that we offer in our podcast is just talking about how things change, everything's impermanent, and the energies weekly are impermanent. But right now, this theme, this thematic, is the most important thematic, because this is the gate that the sun is moving through. And so, yeah, I think that, it's perfect. We're going to talk a lot more about the 32 in general, but just so everyone is aware, every day, about a day, the sun moves through each one of these different places, goes from the first to the second to the third to the fourth to the fifth to the sixth line, and each line has its own qualities. And so, to spare everyone, we can show them, but we'll probably try and just be somewhat brief. Maybe we can include this link to this resource, if it's free and available online, on our in the information section of the YouTube page.
Yeah, I don't know. I get concerned with everything we show, like Jovian Archive, not Jovian Archive, but like Genetic Matrix. Like, what are the copyright laws for us to be like putting stuff in our YouTube videos? So I found it for free online. It's accessible for free online. We can put in the link. Don't know if that'll like affect its accessibility, if people will notice it and get concerned with it being publicly online. But if you are not yet a part of the Human Design community on Facebook, go find yourself some groups, because there's a bunch of resources there. People are usually more than willing to share them. If you need more, by your line one needs. But yeah, good. I feel like Sarah embodied this gene key gate as we were doing this, because I went right into line one and she's like, no, that doesn't work. Let's change it. Let's transform how we're talking about this for it to like endure and be more lasting. And it's not me just reading to you, because that would be boring. But
well, that's my line 3 at work too. But I want to be simultaneously informative and titillating. So trying to keep that flowing.
In other news, from the Human Design perspective, we have the North Node and South Node still in gates 1 and 2. Well, the North Node is in 2, the South Node is in 1. They've been there for a while. That is the second eclipse. It will be conjunct the North and South Node, so it'll be in those gates. So it's worth mentioning now for later when we talk about them. And a fun fact, just right now, Mars is in gate 12.3, and Sarah and I both have 12.3 active in our charts, and so we're very familiar with the energy, which is an energy of self-loathing. Mars is in detriment in 12.3, so if we click on it, you'll see the process of self-analysis. Mars, a perverse and often exaggerated self-hatred, inadequacies in social interaction that lead to the expression of self-hatred. You guys don't get much of that here, but in our side combo, there's plenty of that yum, juicy self-hatred. So if you're feeling hard on yourself this week, it's okay. It's temporary. It's gonna go away. You're not stuck with it forever, like I am, like Sarah is. So you'll be okay. You'll survive. Just give yourself a bath or something this week. But other than that, I think that's enough for like the layout. 32. Well, I guess I'll talk about 32 since I'm doing that. The energy of duration and adapting to change, again, being part of tribal circuitry. This, well, I feel like we're going to bridge together gene keys and human design here, because the gene key shadow is very practical. It's very kind of black and white the way human design is. It's not like fluffy and soft and gentle. It's about money. It's about the material plane. It's about survival. And because of that, it ties in more closely to the human design compared to, like, let's say gate 12, for example. Here we have this energy of self-hatred and this and that, and it's very kind of black and white in its nature. But like when you look at gate 12 from the gene keys perspective, it's more gentle, and it takes on a different nature, because it ends up being about vanity and discrimination and beauty and art and all that stuff. But anyways, just giving you an example how sometimes they line up really well, sometimes they don't. With 32, they do. So we'll bridge the two together for you as we talk. But 32 is about the tribe having enough resources to maintain that everyone survives. 54, the marrying maiden, is the ambition to provide resources for the tribe. And then 32 is like the understanding, the awareness the awareness center, the instinct of knowing, are there enough resources? If they're not, what needs to be done differently? What needs to change? What is the tribe doing that's good for the tribe? What's the tribe doing that's bad for the tribe? Recognizing all the little places that things can be tweaked to ensure survival. As I was listening to the Gene Key chapter, the things that my mind comes across usually go hand in hand with whatever is happening in the present moment. And if you've been following along, like I've been talking about rave cosmology a little bit here and there because that's what I've been into. But today I started listening to something else called the Architecture of Life, which is about like the fun, it's like the microcosm. If cosmology is the macrocosm of the universe, the Architecture of Life is like the microcosm of like, how does an inanimate object, like what's the chart of an inanimate object? What's the chart of a single cell? Very biological. And part of what Ra Uru, who is the founder of Human Design, was saying within this course context, this conversation was that we're constantly seeking that which we are not. That's like the foundation of how the Maya and everything exists around us, to be seeking, you know, you think of the law of attraction, you think like attracts like, but the way matter operates is that it attracts the unlike. The yin looks for the yang looks for the yin. They're always trying to plug into one another. And with this particular gate 32 or gene key 32, I feel like there was this big aha moment in my head, and I'm not able to fully articulate it the way I'd like to. So apologies if I'm not making sense. But there's this the seeking of like prolonging the human race, right? When you think about how does the tribe survive, it's about mating. It's about finding the right partner with the right genetic makeup so that your children will survive. And in that, it's like not just, you know, material resources, it's genetic resources. Is there enough genetic material within a group to ensure the survival of that species? And it fits in with, like, I started watching The Empress this past week, which is on Netflix, Kaiserin. And if you're unfamiliar with it, it's about the Austro-Hungarian Empire in the 1800s, and just how the emperor king, was he a king, was he an emperor? It's a hard word to say, emperor. He married into the Bavarian, or his wife is from the Bavarian family line, and so far it's about like, will they have children? And if you think about so many kingdoms and queendoms and royalty, and that they've been very obsessed with, you know, making sure there's an heir so that the throne can continue, all that stuff. And like I looked at that particular king's chart, and he has 54, 20, 32, I believe. So he had the built-in genetic imperative to like make sure the line survives, all that. But it's interesting because like they inbred a lot. They would marry each other's cousins. Also, side note, I've been reading Pride and Prejudice while I finished it. But within that context, like people marry their cousins all the time. And it caused me to like look up, like, when did people actually stop marrying their cousins? Like, when did that become a thing? Because 1800s was not that long ago where people were still marrying their first cousins. Albert Einstein married his cousin. There's a lot of people that married their cousin even in modern day, like in the US, at least if you're here with us in the US, not every state has it against the law to like not marry your cousin. Like in some states you still can. Kind of weird. But anyways, if you think about like that, the mind is trying to take control over the spleen. It's the mind that tries to say like, we have to care about our resources, we have to care about our genetic line, and so we're going to keep things in the family and inbreed to make sure that we can survive. But they're working against themselves because they are creating genetic mutations that won't ensure the survival of the family. And so the key is that the spleen, the instinctive, intuitive center, knows what is healthy and what is correct, and the mind doesn't. The mind doesn't get to be in charge and say like, hey, this is what we should do. And so when it comes to material resources and like money and all that, which is a very human material thing that we deal with on the regular, not necessarily continuing the kingdom and queendom family heir line, all that, we think about money. And whenever the mind tries to control the situation and think about how can I avoid failure, it's the fear of failure. The spleen has all the gates within this lane have certain fears, and 32 is the fear of failure, and it can smell failure. And so it gets caught up in like, I don't want to fail, so what can I do? And then if the mind takes over this lane and tries to manipulate what the body does to prevent failure from happening, then it's going to ensure that failure happens. But when you trust yourself, when you trust your mechanics, and you just do what's correct for you, the money is always there. And like Richard Rudd brings this up in his chapter, that when you're not trying to make money, not trying to look for the resources, whatever you need is always there for you. And it's something that I found to be very true for myself. And another piece of this thing is like I'm really on a roll here, Sarah. But another piece of this is the 32 is part of tribal circuitry, and in that we can rely on other people for resources. We can come together and share resources. It's not one man, every man for himself. And in our modern day, we've gotten to that point where people move out of their parents' house at a young age because they don't want to deal with that sort of energy anymore. And so we think, I have to make it on my own, I have to provide, I have to do all this stuff. And we create that disconnect, and we are no longer able to rely on tribal energetics to support us, to bring the adequate resources the tribe needs to survive, like a tribe or a family unit or a community. We're not very communal people, sorry. It's just where we've gotten to in our evolutionary process. But with 32, if you realize like you can go to a tribe for help, you can go to people for support, and they're usually more than willing to help and support you if it's the right group for you, if it's your tribal home, like fractal home, the resources are there, and you just have to connect to that group and not think about trying to do it on your own, because if you try to do it on your own, things won't go well. Anyways, I think that's my long rant. I'm not sure if I have anything else, but Sarah, please take the mic, because I need
No, I mean, I think that was all really interesting information, not least of all the information around inbreeding.
Cousins.
Yeah, cousins. I didn't know like our podcast sometimes takes tangents, and I'm always like surprised and interested, intrigued by what's going on. Can I transition us to the gene key?
Oh yeah, sure. I forgot to share it. Whoops.
No, that's totally okay. So Gene Key 32, the city is veneration, the gift is preservation, and the shadow is failure, which Lora just talked about a little bit. And its programming partner is the 42, where the sun is, where the earth is right now, and that's celebration, detachment, and expectation. And so, I have a a natal planet in the 42. And so even though I don't have the 32, this transit is still, I guess you could say, lighting up aspects of my own natal chart.
Interrupt you. Not only that, but like if you're looking at your own chart and you're like, well, I don't have 32. Sarah and I both have the married maiden. We have 54. And this is part of that, like you're always looking for that other half, that energy to plug into. So part of like, if you have a gate and it's just a gate, it's not the full channel, you're not self-mind, your body, your mechanics is always going to look for that thing. So Sarah and I are built mechanically to always look for 32, to think that we have to have it, we have to embody it, we have to do it, when it's not what we're here to bring to the table. So I was thinking about that as I was reading it, and thinking about my own relationship to how much I try to strive for 32, how much I think about money and resources, and whether or not I'm able to provide for myself or other people. But like Sarah said, she also has the programming partner, but she also has 54. Okay, go ahead. Sorry to interrupt.
No, that's a good point. Obviously it's gonna change, like the keys that we have, I guess, in our natal chart and our design and personality human design chart. We are either more or less aware and comfortable with, or like we get the energy a little bit in a different way. And so whenever there's a connection or whenever there's an opposition, it's just something that we like to pay attention to for ourselves. So some things that that really stuck out to me, and I guess I'll go on a little tangent. My wonderful therapist was talking to me about one of my insecurities. Surprise, surprise, what else is therapy for? And she was telling me about how, like, basically, like, I'm allowing my fear and shame to hide behind the specific insecurity, but that if it wasn't this, it would be something else. And Richard Rudd talks about this exact concept in the book, where he talks about like the fact that the fear is the problem itself. It's not it, you know, the fear like of whatever it is of failure is not so much that, because we can always find something to be fearful of if we don't have genetic continuity, if we don't have the right resources. The fear will just move around and morph and hide behind and play shadow games internally with you. And so the idea is not to totally emancipate yourself from the fear, but the idea is just to be aware that like it's there and not to be making reactive decisions from the not self in fear. And so I felt like this has been a very big learning lesson for me in my life, just around, you know, in every stage and age of my life, there's always something that I've been insecure about in regards to like myself, and it changes. It's not always the same thing, but like it feels the same from a qualitative perspective. It has the same energy to it because it has to do with fear. And the spleen, which is where this gate and key reside, has so much to do with fear. And so I just thought that was one thing that was really interesting. And, you know, he also just touches on the fact that basically, you know, to raise your consciousness, it's just to no longer be making decisions from that place of fear. And it's not, like I said before, you're not going to emancipate yourself from fear, but you can make sure that your not self mind isn't grabbing onto the fear, telling you that it's your intuition, or like trying to trick you into believing it's like a higher truth. And this actually probably plays in a little bit to the 57 as well, because we're in the splenic center still. And so last week we were also talking about how, you know, just being aware like of the nature of the intuitive consciousness that you have is such a valuable tool in making sure that you're not making decisions from your fear-based thinking, because it's never going to be that the decision, the feeling that you get around fear, it's never going to be like a soft, comforting feeling. And so you can tell when something's coming from fear versus when it's coming from, let's call it, you know, yourself, your body, your higher self, you know, the correctness of your being, whatever you want to call it. So like being aware of that. And for me too, it's been really hard to be aware of it, because when you have a dysregulated nervous system, which a lot of us have because of childhood trauma, too much screen time, too much activation of our physical bodies in ways that aren't healthy, it's really easy to get caught up in the fear and like not be able to tap into the intuitive knowing that your body holds. And so just, you know, having these tools to like guide yourself back to homeostasis so that you're not functioning from the fear of failure is so important. And he goes on to say too, that in the repressed, or no, not in the repressed, there's the repressed and the reactive nature of fundamentalist, and then the reactive nature is disjointed. And he talks about, you know, what the fear does to you is it takes you out of touch with the flow of life. And the flow of life is so important. We talked about gentleness last week, because the way that life flows, it's very gentle, it's very nuanced, it's very unfolding, it's very much, and he talks about water too in this chapter, but there's just this quality of it that is, you know, the nature of nature, the nature of plants, the nature of any type of like living organism. And what we often do when we're living in the not self is we disjoint ourselves from that flow, and it wreaks havoc on our physical bodies, because we're not allowing ourselves to move like intuitively in the moment. And we're like, it's almost just like this very like stop, start, stop, start, stop, start kind of energy, where we're never really in flow, and we're constantly gripping or trying to control or trying to push or anything like that. And so we see people all the time. It's like when you see someone, Laura sent me a meme, when you see someone that's cringe, like that is them not being in flow. And I mean, not for nothing, like it's fine to be cringe in the, I guess, millennial / Gen Z way, but it's like the when you see someone that's just not in it, like they're not in their body, they're just like not moving in flow, that has a lot to do with them not trusting the nature and the flow of the universal kind of like tides. So yeah, so you want to add anything before I continue?
Yeah, but I don't want to interrupt you. I feel like what I have to add is, I don't know if it'll be disruptive. So you continue, then I'll add later.
Okay. I guess it's just, do you want to take down the screen?
The thing. Okay. There we go. There we go.
Well, no, I think that, you know, the interesting thing about this key is just in its guidance to just be more like nature. And there's a quote, and I can't remember who it's by, but it's like, follow nature's patterns, like her secret is patience. And in this, it just talks about how like the part of the old, like this has to do with preservation, right? That is the gift. And so the way that we preserve things, and this also has to do with changeability and adaptability, and the way that we preserve things is by allowing the thing that worked from the past to remain and being discerning about what it is that worked and taking that forward while simultaneously grafting onto the past the kind of forward momentum and the technological advancements of the future. And so this is where change comes in, because it's not just, okay, let's be fundamentalist, which is the reactive nature, but it's also let's take on the new constantly in this kind of refined, perfecting way, where we know that perfection isn't a destination, it's like a path where you're constantly in this state of taking what's old that works the best and putting on top of it the new that's also going to work. So just understanding like that quality of, you know, of old and new being brought together in the present moment in this like intuitive splenic gate, I think goes a long way in understanding the energy that's at work here. And yeah, I mean, I'm just taking a look at my notes really quick. And basically, I guess the last thing that, you know, just to talk about veneration is this kind of reverence for the nature of life itself and the fractal line. And I don't know that we've really touched on the fractal line here that much, but basically we've talked about it like on and off and in passing. But basically your fractal is this kind of chain of human people and maybe plants and animals too, that are all correct for you, that are all working in kind of a subtle way. I talked to Laura about this. I said, your fractal line is part of your subtle body, probably. And so there's this give and take relationship with it. And so understanding the nature of fractals and the way that we're all connected in a sense gives you a deep veneration or reverence for the spirit of the universe. If you're too busy being disjointed from it, you can miss the synchronicities, the kind of these strange threads that weave together and these connections that are formed between you and other people and also the events of your life. And so this, if you have this reverence for all of life, you end up more able to see the connectivity and the inherent beauty that exists as this underlying perfect geometrical pattern that's connecting the different aspects of your life and making coherent narratives out of them. So I think that's all I wanted to say. So you can
really beautiful at the end. I'm going to touch on what you were just saying,
okay.
because I have thoughts in response to that, apart from like other thoughts, but I really liked it. So in terms of like fractal line, with rave cosmology, like Big Bang was that just like you have a design crystal and you have a personality crystal, and they make a part of your illusion of separateness, your reality. There is like an OG original design crystal, and let's call it a personality crystal. It's not a personality crystal, two design crystals, but let's call it personality crystal that formed the Big Bang, and they collided. And in that collision, think of like a crystal fracturing. It broke into an infinite amount of shards, and all those shards separated and just created space. Hence, like the universe is expanding. All that matter that was really dense and really concentrated exploded and became our multiverse, our biverse, our infinite universe, whatever you want to call it. And we're putting the puzzle back together. I won't try to get too into it because it can be depressive, but we're putting that puzzle back together. And so when you go through your trajectory of your life, you interact with certain people and you're collecting the shards that you were a part of within that cosmic universe, because matter can't be destroyed. It can only be transformed, or whatever it is. Matter can't be created or destroyed, it can only be transformed. So all the matter that existed at the beginning of the universe. And so you are eternal. You began at the beginning of the universe, and you started somewhere within that original crystal structure. And so your fractal is what brings you back to where you belong within that crystal structure. So it's wholeness and veneration. So it's the cosmology, the big and then the micro, which is what I'm learning about today. It's fascinating how it all pieces itself together. But all inanimate objects have the design that gives them potential for life. Like the body graph of an inanimate object is just gate 25. And 25 is about the spirit of life. And Robert, when he talks about Frankenstein, of like, you know, you just put an electric shock in something and poof, it turns alive. And like that's our reality, where matter, which is inanimate, and yet there is this shock electricity of consciousness that allows it to be animate. It's just consciousness. It's just the interaction with the neutrino stream in an aware, sort of aware form. Not always aware, but there's this veneration there. That's how it fits in. Like listening to Ra talk about, like, if you think about all the matter, like every single inanimate thing ever, like every piece of matter that exists within our multiverse, everything that was part of that original crystal structure has this gate 25 within it, within the body graph of like this potential for life. And 25 is like the love of everything. It is very similar to this energy of veneration. So it's just full circle, and it makes me happy to talk about it in this way. But the other stuff I wanted to mention is that Ra, well, I feel like it's been passed on the grapevine. I don't know if like Ra says this specifically himself, or if there's a quote out there on the internet that brings it up. But we're not here for survival like our ancestors. We're here to survive and figure out the material plane. And we're here for awareness. I mean, like Ra does say that to a certain extent, but we're here for awareness. We're here for our consciousness to interact with our own self-aware consciousness, to interact with someone else's self-aware consciousness, so we can understand what's going on and mutate and change and evolve and blah, blah, blah. And to figure out the material plane is not the game. It's not the purpose of why we're here. And yeah, it's been a purpose of why we're here to get to where we are now, but it's no longer the reason why we're still here and why we're continuing to exist. And yet we get so caught up in our ancestral lineage of needing to survive, needing to maintain our physical existence on this plane. And so strategy and authority helps you let go of the need to try to figure out how to survive, and to trust the mechanics, to trust the form, to trust the inanimate and let it take care of you. Or it's not inanimate, but like the matter, the yin principle of our reality. Trust in matter and it will take care of you. And yeah, so if you're freaking out about the material plane, I feel like this particular channel is here the people with this channel are here to mechanically figure out the material plane. Mechanically, they're here to figure out resources and to distribute them, and not necessarily to distribute them, that's gate 45, but to understand the pressure to have resources and know what needs to be changed in order to maintain resources. Like, people with this channel are here for that, but not everyone's here for that. And that's not the sole purpose of why we're all here. Just food for thought if you can get caught up in the trip of like, I'm human, I need to survive. How do I pay off my bills and all that fun stuff? So yeah, it's part of the picture. But yeah, I feel like you did a really good job of covering everything. So I let you take the Gene Key mic today. So sorry. Thank you.
Well, no, and I think, sometimes you get into flow and sometimes you absolutely don't. And I guess the one thing I just wanted to say is that, like, Richard Rudd also comments that, like, everything you need, you'll always be able to have. And if you can trust that, life becomes a lot less fear-based, right? Or at least if fear decides to go somewhere else. So I think that's probably, that's a good treatment of the 32. And I'm like kind of itching to talk about the astrology because there's so much going on right now that it could make your head spin.
Can you stop? So on my screen, like, I move our little faces so they're not in the way for me to look at the screen, but I don't know if where your little faces are on your screen, or like the audience, I don't know where on your screen our little faces are. So hopefully everything's okay on the screen right now. But this is a chart of the moment for astrology. We're still in that grand trine with the sun and Venus together in Libra, and Mars again 12.3 in Gemini, and Saturn in Aquarius at 18 degrees. So that's a big picture. But the eclipses will be on the 25th. I took notes. The first eclipse that's coming up is the solar eclipse, and it's at 2 degrees. It's really interesting. It's at 2 degrees Scorpio. And I say it's really interesting because it's on the cusp. Astrology people like that word, cusp. It's on the cusp of 2 different gates. Gate 50 ends at 2 degrees, or 159, and gate 27, I believe those are the 2 gates. Again, I took notes so I don't mess up. 28, 50, then 28. 28 starts at 2 degrees 00. And so with like it's the 21st century, we have technology, we have science to tell us exactly where these placements are, but I feel like there's discrepancies and like we're not always 100% accurate. So is this eclipse in gate 50 or is it in 28? Time will tell when like other websites put up the charts. I didn't look up the specific time. But also, if you think about an eclipse, it's a duration. It's not a singular moment. Especially lunar eclipses. I mean, this one's a solar one. Solar ones are faster. But like there is a precise moment where the degrees are exact, where the moon is exactly with the sun within the astrological belt. But if you think about a lunar eclipse, it's a phase of time in which the moon is being shadowed. But then in practicality, it's a phase of time in which we're being impacted by these energies. But anyways, 2 degrees Scorpio, that's my long verbed, my long-winded point. 2 degrees Scorpio, gate 50/28, and then 2 weeks, and that's on October 25th around 7 a.m. Eastern time. And the next eclipse is the lunar eclipse at 16 degrees Taurus, and that's on November 8th around 6 a.m. Eastern time, and that's in gates 2 and 1, like I said earlier. Wow. So 16 degrees Taurus and Scorpio. Line 3, which it's interesting, but go ahead and talk, Sarah.
No, I'm like, wow, because I was going to ask you to follow up with the degrees of the second eclipse that's happening in November, which we'll cover more in depth, like as the weeks progress closer to it. But that's right on my ascendant axis. It's like, it is right smack dab on it, because I have 14 degrees of Scorpio rising, 14 degrees of Taurus on the descendant. So that's going to be very interesting. And, I've already felt like right now, the 1-2, it feels very like transformational energy. And that's where the nodes are. So even though we're having this first eclipse that's happening in these two other gates, the second eclipse is really happening exactly where the nodes are. Not, I don't think it's on the exact line, but it's very close. And so that's, that's just something to be aware of. There's going to be things that happen. We've talked about this, but like material reality, like this is like matter manifesting times. So things are going to show up in reality that have been, I don't want to say faded, because there's a complicated, like, that's a complicated word in general, but just to touch on the nature of eclipses is just there's Lora, you've said actually before that like the universe like picks you up if you're like not in the right place, and then it like puts you down somewhere else that is correct. And so that's, there's things that happen that are like big, larger than life, magical, maybe in the good or in the bad way. Like everything's subjective based on your chart, based on your level of consciousness. So, not to fearmonger, because I don't think that there's anything inherently wrong with eclipses, even though ancient astrologers were afraid of them. But they are just part of the cycles of life in general. So if we look at it from there, we can be a little bit more, I guess, objective about it. The other thing, so eclipse on the October 25th is when the sun and moon are both in Scorpio. And then the eclipse, and then also what's happening on the 22nd, so rewind 3 days, is there's going to be a Venus Cazimi, the sun, and that's happening in gate, what's the gate next week?
1 second.
I'm sorry, I shouldn't rely on you to know the things that I don't know at the moment.
50? But well, right now we're in 32. So 50?
Yeah, well, I know it's opposite of 3. I know that then it's 50. Yeah, so
no, I don't know. I don't know. It's not there yet, right? Because they're moving together. It'll be 50, right?
It'll be
after
50.
32 is 50.
Yeah. So can you click on 50, or is that not possible?
No, it's not there yet. It's the well, I can open it in this PDF, but it's what was I gonna say?
50?
No, I was gonna say something else. I don't know. That's how my brain works. Let's scrolly.
We're gonna just really quickly for our own, because this is where the Venus
29th degree. That's what I wanted to say. It's the 29th degree of Libra. There we go. Good job, brain.
It is the 29th degree of Libra. And something that I heard from Chani Nicholas while we were going into this whole, like, just the internet has crazy stuff about Venus cycles that aren't always true. But Chani said that basically, like, usually this conjunction happens in Scorpio. And so it's happening because Venus has a very geometrical orbit with the sun. And so usually it happens in Scorpio, and now it's happening in Libra. And so there's something, is it 50?
Yeah, 26 degrees Libra to 2 degrees Scorpio. It's 50.
Okay.
Here's the main paragraph, so I'll read it for you. The body that the sixth line builds out of intimacy, the 50th gate guards and maintains. This is the gate of values. It is the gate of tribal law. It's the awareness possibility that the 3 streams of the splenic awareness, taste, intuition, and instinct. It's the key gate in our well-being process. It's who wrote this paragraph? My goodness. It is the heart of our personal immunity and our capacity to both assess and defend. There we go. The expression of this capacity is through values. It is our values that are the foundation of our defense. The defense circuit is our sexual circuit. It is the core of the tribal process. Each intimacy that results in the birth demands the offspring and union are nurtured into adulthood with gate 27 and guided by values, gate 50. It's this gate which establishes the rule of caring coming out of our most ancient awareness. It is a fundamental ingredient in human survival. Each of the gates of the Splenic Center have an underlying fear. Here it's the fear of responsibility. Yeah, it's bringing up caring for others, having nurturing capacity to care for children and raise them. but it'll be, well, I don't know what the precise degree is. It's either corruption or adaptability for the line 3 or 4.
Well,
Neither of which have Venus. So Venus is not in detriment, but the sun, yeah, neither the sun.
Well, I think it's interesting to think about it, not just from a human design perspective, but also from just, if we're thinking about traditional Western astrology, this is happening at the 29th degree, of course, of Libra, which is the sign that Venus rules. And Venus is going through her little death and rebirth process where she goes and she's conjoined the sun. And so there's a cleansing, I feel like, of Venusian things. I mean, that's, maybe I'm partial because it's happening in my 12th house. So like, certainly there's a cleansing of Venusian themes in my life. But this is something that I've been thinking about because it's also in astrology closely opposite my natal Venus. So a lot coming up around the Venusian qualities of life and how they show up for us and the strength of them and things along that nature. So, I mean, we also have a bunch of other things happening. You don't have to pull up the chart right now, but Mars is very much closely squaring Neptune. Mars is also trining the sun. The sun is very closely squaring Pluto. And so it's like bing, 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 just like down the line, just like things are happening and change is taking place. And Saturn is squaring Uranus. And so within the next week, I believe that Saturn is going to, this is a big month astrologically. Within the week, Saturn's going to go direct. But then also we have Jupiter going back into Aries at the end of the month, Mars going retrograde at the end of the month. And so we'll be back on to talk about those things more in depth, but like, this is just a very dynamic month where there's so many different moving parts. It's probably better to just like ride the tide and like see where you land when all of this energy kind of starts to dissipate, and things are a little bit more inactive. So do you want to add anything about that, Laura?
Yeah, I have a lot.
Okay.
Like the foundation, like where is the foundation, Sarah? You have to lay out the foundation. So I'm going to talk a lot right now about technical stuff. I'm going to educate, which is, I walked today. I don't walk. I walked today. And I was thinking, if I had to pick a word to describe myself, it would be pedantic. Let me give you a little lecturing Laura. Okay, here we go. So, well, first, because time-wise, we have the conjunction and then we have the eclipses. With the Venus and Sun and Earth, they have this really intricate pattern in which they interact with each other. Sarah touched on it, that it works in like 4/8 year cycles, that Venus always returns to the same position in the zodiacal belt where she's conjunct the Sun. So right now that is, the 29 degrees, but it's usually Scorpio 0 degrees position. And so every 4 years, basically within a day or two, depending on leap year cycles, like it's very mathematically precise that Venus is either direct and conjunct the Sun or retrograde and conjunct the Sun. And so this year, it's a direct that she's conjunct the Sun. 4 years from now, probably on this date of whatever it is, October 22nd, that she'll be retrograde and conjunct the Sun. And it's so mathematically precise, but it moves just the tiniest bit every year. And that's why like this pattern in progress, it hasn't always been, it's like not always equally 29 degrees. It moves a little bit backwards through the zodiacal belt for like all these conjunctions. There's 5 of them. That's why like we think about witchcraft, they worship the goddess of Venus, and the pentagonal prism, the star, it's 5 points because of Venus orbit and how she makes these 5 conjunctions with the Sun very strategically. And so the other positions are in Aries, Gemini, Capricorn, and it was Leo. How we moved into Virgo, because every year it moves just the tiniest bit, like half a degree or so. And Sarah sent me a meme yesterday or a post on Instagram of someone saying something, and I was like, I've never heard of that it's like a 243-year-old cycle that this happens. And I looked it up and they made a mistake. So boo for you. It's a 251-year cycle that it takes Venus to go through the whole cycle and get back to that point where she started, of those 5 points. So like think of it as 5 different simultaneous cycles that are happening. This point of Venus at 29 degrees 251 years ago, it was the same conjunction. But then like the 4 year after year, every 4 years, every 4 years, every 4 years, it's still in that same spot. It's just slightly off. So like there's that. But thinking of that, Venus has these repetitive cycles that we can work with every 4 years, every 8 years in our own relationship to her and like that particular area of our chart. So yeah, she's making the shift from Scorpio into Libra. And so from now on, like these conjunctions will happen within Libra, like the end degrees of Libra. And I guess it's worth noting, but again, it happens multiple times in our lifetimes that we get this. I haven't looked at the math too much. So that's that. And again, it's important now, like Sarah said, because Venus her home is Libra. So like there's more harmony with this conjunction transit than it perhaps has been going on with all the Scorpio conjunctions. There is that. And then if we look at eclipses and like what is technically happening with an eclipse, okay, like Sarah said, our lovely ancestors feared eclipses because they didn't understand what was happening, why the sun was being hidden. I like to go over the Vedic mythology. Do we have time for that? It's a story. Do we want to hear mythology? Okay. I'm going to get an MRI later today. I think for now we're good, but we have time for mythology. So it is sort of like one of those creation stories from the Vedic perspective. You have gods and you have demigods, asuras, and you have demons, but devas. I think they're devas. I wrote this at some point in my email newsletter. There's like an archive somewhere on the internet if you want to go find it and see what I wrote. But we have 3 main groups of beings: the gods Vishnu, Brahma, Shiva, Brahma, Vishnu. There we go. Shiva, Brahma, Vishnu. We have the demigods, the asuras, which are like Earth, Sun, Moon, like the planets. They're immortal, but they're not as high up as the main 3. And then we have the demons, which if you think about a demon, you're going to put a negative connotation on them, like, oh, you're bad, you're the bad guy, we're all going to judge you and ostracize you because you're the quote unquote bad guy. And one of the demigods, I believe, someone did a little something they weren't supposed to do. They like put a necklace on an elephant, something ridiculous that somehow unlocked a curse and stole the immortality from all the demigods. That's not it. So excuse my poor recitational skills of stories, but someone, don't remember who it was, but they did something they weren't supposed to. I should like open up my email newsletter right now because it'll have notes, but that's okay. And in that process, the demigods were like, hey, we're no longer immortal, like we gotta fix this. So they, like little children, went, Vishnu, tell us what to do, we're no longer immortal. Not that they have that voice. This is me exaggerating with my storytelling skills. And so Vishnu was like, okay, go to this giant rock in the water, in the ocean, turn it, and then you'll get an elixir that'll make you immortal again. So like, okay. And so they went and they wrapped a rope around this giant boulder in the ocean, and there weren't enough of them to be able to turn it. They're like, this isn't working, we need help. And so they're like, let's go ask the devas, the demons. And so they go to them and they're like, hey guys, we could use your help. Like we have this project that we're working on to become immortal, and there's not enough of us. Like if you help us, you can also drink this potion and become immortal with us. Like, do you want to do that? And they're like, yeah, sure, we want to become immortal. And so the demons join them, and then they're all working together, and like all these things come out of this churning of the ocean, different gifts, different goddesses, all these magical things. And one of them is the elixir of life, or the fountain of youth, whatever it's called. And they did so deliberately, tricking the bad guys into thinking that the bad guys are going to get something out of the little exchange. And so then they're like, okay, Vishnu, can you help us drink the potion? So that like they're on our backs now. They're like, hey, give us the potion. We're like, we don't want to give it to you. We don't know what to do because we're immature children. Can you help us? And so Vishnu's like, fine. Vishnu disguised himself as a sexy lady, doing a little dance to entice the demons because, you know, they're demonic, they like materialism, they like sex, they like all the pleasures of the flesh, right? And so if Vishnu is a sexy lady, then they're going to be distracted. And so they all like form up two lines, and then Vishnu has the ladle and like gives the ladle to a god, and then pretends to give a little ladle to the bad guy, but like does a little dance, so like they think they're getting some, but they're not. Goes back to the gods, gives them some potion, then goes back to the bad guy. One of these demons realizes what's going on and like, wait, this isn't fair. And so they sneak around, get between the earth and the moon in line, or the sun and the moon in line, and pretend to be one of the good guys, the quote unquote good guys. And so by the time Vishnu gives this bad guy a sip, the sun and moon realize what's happening. They're like, Vishnu, look, he's right here, he's cheating. And so Vishnu goes smack, decapitates the demigod as the elixir is going down his throat, cuts off the head from the body, but because the head was immortalized, because it got some of the elixir, it can't die. And then the body is just there representing like the dead or alive body. Don't know if the elixir got into the body, but it can't die now. And so it's a decapitated demon. And they're like, what are we going to do with you? And so it was cursed to orbit around the earth, forever separated with the head and the tail of this like dragon-like demon body, never to be able to be reunited. And as revenge, this demon attacks the sun and the moon every year in the form of eclipses when he swallows them. But because the head doesn't have a body, he swallows them, and then they come out of the other end. It's not a permanent, you know, swallowing of the earth and moon. So that's the story, but like my personal bias lesson here is like, the good guys were the bad guys. Like they tried lying and cheating their way to success. And like, what does that teach us for creation myth? Like, that's not a very good story. And so it makes you question morality and our actions and the consequences our actions have on one another and all this stuff when it comes to eclipses. But that doesn't really apply to like, what do eclipses mean for us? When it comes to what do eclipses mean for us, I like to look at human design. And Sarah just took a sip of water, so I'm gonna also hydrate my parched throat.
Yeah.
Because lots of talking. So if we think about our solar system from the human design perspective, what the way in which we're being impacted by the planetary movements is by neutrinos. As we mentioned before, these neutrinos are quantum particles that have mass. They're infinitesimally small, and yet they have mass, and so they can interact with matter and affect it and change it. And so the stars are the planetary bodies, astrological bodies that create neutrinos through the process of beta decay. And so they're giving off light, and quantum particle neutrinos don't move at the speed of light. They move slightly slower than the speed of light, but they're always trailing light. And impacting everything and going through everything. I think 3 trillion neutrinos move through every square inch of reality every second. Like there's a lot of them. They're constantly programming us. And these stars create the neutrinos. So our sun gives us 70% of our neutrino stream. Jupiter kind of is a failed star. It gives off some neutrinos. And the rest come from the neighboring stars in our hood of the galaxy. And so these neutrinos, they intermingle with us, they intermingle with the planets, and so they come to us, go to the planets, and that's how we're getting the implications of the planetary movements for us and how they affect us, because we're getting their neutrino stream that they've gotten from the sun or from the other stars. So it's a constant play. We're all constantly intermingling with one another. When you think about the North Node and South Node, though, those are not planets, those are not stars. They are calculated points where the sun and the moon meet along the ecliptical belt that surrounds our horizontal plane, not the sagittal plane, it's not the transverse plane, whatever the horizontal plane of our Earth is called, the point in which the sun and moon meet along that plane with their proportional size, they block one another's perception that we have of them. They get shadowed and eclipsed. And so it's this calculated point that exists between them. It's a clicking into place. It's not necessarily like a concrete physical space in reality. And when we think about how neutrinos impact that space, neutrinos move through that space, but there's no matter there. There's no density, there's no yin, it's just energy that's there. And so the neutrinos interact with the north node and south node differently. And when it comes to like our individual lives and our purpose here, how we live our life, north and south node, north node and south node dictate our storyline. It's the trajectory of the life. It's what the life is here to experience. That if you pretend your life is a movie, it's the plot of the movie, like what's happening, what's going on, where does the movie start, where does the movie end, and that whole continuation that's dictated and kind of put in place by the north node and south node. And so when it comes to these transits, the moon and the sun are going into that position and interacting with that calculated point with the storyline. So it makes sense from the human design perspective why, like previously when I was just an astrologer, I would say like the universe is picking you up and plopping you back down somewhere where you didn't think you were going. Like I'm doing this thing, I'm happy with my life, like I have this set path for me. And then the universe goes, no, that's not for you. Let's change what you're doing and put you somewhere else where you're supposed to be. For us, because we're living according to our minds, that's jarring and uncomfortable because we think that's wrong all of a sudden, when really it's correct. The universe is fixing us. So you can think about it this way, that the sun and moon are entering into these points where we're being recalculated and calibrated, we're being fixed, we're being realigned to the storyline of our life so that we can be on the right path and not mess ourselves up. But it's uncomfortable, right? Because we like to have our mind in control, and it's not in control. And so when things happen that our mind thinks is bad, we're gonna perceive it as bad instead of how entertaining. But anyways, yeah, I think that covers my perception diagnosis of eclipses and that stuff. I don't know.
Yeah, I just wanted to point out too that like the time that the mythology came about was during the time that we were seven-centered beings. And traditional astrology was also built during ancient astrology when we were seven-centered beings. And so the things that happened in materiality were very important because we just didn't have the length of life. We were living for Saturn cycles. We weren't living for Uranian cycles. There was all kinds of things that made these types of large events like dangerous for the seven-centered being. And so I think with our added perspective, after we turned into nine-centered beings in the late 1700s, we can be a little bit more objective about eclipses and a little bit less fearful, right? So, and yeah, I believe that traditionally the North Node is like this hungry ghost that can never be, that can eat and eat and eat and never be filled. And then the South Node is like this kind of like wandering, like unable to ever be, basically unable to like, I'm trying to think about the energy of it because it doesn't have the, the Amrit, or it doesn't have the nectar. And so it's like constantly like unable to ground itself into material reality and like kind of just like afloat in the universe. And so there's these two kind of like very intense energies that are associated with these 2 points that Lora was sharing the mythology about. And the eclipses in general, they are, like I said before, matter materializing, matter manifesting times. And so whereas certain things are just energetic and everything is energetic before it's manifest in material reality, like we see the things that are energetic go into materiality during eclipse season. So that is probably my 2 cents, but I think it was a really good treatment of the eclipses and and just the nature of them, and like what we can expect and where it all comes from, and understanding the technical and the mythological and the practical side. So I'm happy with us. Did you want to add anything else astrologically? Yeah.
Well, not astrologically, but yeah, that you brought up the great point. I was like, I don't know how this relates to us. Like, obviously, I know how it relates to us. I just forgot the North Node and South Node in our charts with how we connect to the material plane. But these particular eclipses right now, the North Node and South Node are in gates 1 and 2. 2 is where the magnetic monopole lives. And if you think about your experience of life as a vehicle, the magnetic monopole is the driver. It's what gets you to point A to point B. So I feel like it's really fitting, like, for everyone on this plane of just like huge recalibration, that what is in charge of getting us from point A to point B is like that is intermingling and interacting with this trajectory that we have. Because our conscious minds, our little noggins, they're the passenger and they're trying to grab for the wheel, but like they don't got access to the wheel, and so they're trying to control the operation here, the life, and they can't. And it's the vehicle, that's the body is the vehicle. And so we have to trust magnetic monopole, which is not part of our consciousness, or it's not part of our self-awareness. It's what holds our reality together. It holds us together with our mechanics, and it's what guides us along our own unique individual trajectories of what we're supposed to experience. And so there's a lot of surrender. Like gate 2 and gate 1 are the essential yang and yin, 2 being the ultimate yin. I'm just like, we are here to surrender to the mechanics, to the form principle, to our material reality. And like Sarah was saying, with 7-centered beings, they were here to survive. Like we were saying before with this particular channel, 3254, we're no longer here to survive. Like we've evolved past that, but our ancestors prior to the late 1700s, they were here to survive. And so it was important that they, did everything they could to ensure their longevity, because it was brief. But yeah, I agree. Good covering of all the energies at play. Is there anything else astrologically that you want to cover or no?
I mean, like I think we're gonna talk more about a lot of these things, like the some of the squaring energy that's happening right now next week when we talk about the rest of it. So I think we can close up for the day, and then we're going to revisit some of these longer transits next week.
Yeah. So thank you for listening, everyone. I hope you've enjoyed our conversation. If you like this, share it with a friend. Why not? If it's correct, have you gone to mybodygraph.com yet? If you haven't, now's the time to go check out your bodygraph. But yeah, go share this. Go be merry. Go not die during eclipse season.
Okay. Oh, and I just want to shout out to our 18 subscribers, because last week we had 6 and then we went to 18. And so
thank you for subscribing.
Yeah, I'm infusing gratitude with every single one of you, because it feels really amazing to have some people out there who are interested in the same things that we're interested in. Feel free to comment or reach out to us. All of our contact info is below the video. So we will catch you guys next week for the 50, and have a great rest of your week.
Well, I was going to say we're not meeting next Tuesday, because next Tuesday is the eclipse, right? So we'll meet before the eclipse again and talk to you again about it, likely. Okay. Bye, everyone.
Perfect. Okay. Bye.